going on, everybody? This is Taetro for ADSR, and today I want to talk to you about the two brand new reverbs completing Arturia's FX Collection. Now, if you don't already know, Arturia already has collections of 3 delays, 3 compressors, 3 preamps, and 3 filters, along with one already released plate reverb. But finally, they've completed this full FX collection with the addition of Rev Spring-636, a spring reverb, and Rev Intensity, a really cinematic, different kind of reverb. We're gonna go through both of those in the context of this beat that I'm making, and you can see what they sound like and some of the unique functions. Alright, so first here I want to check out the new spring reverb, and I think a cool way to do that would be to add a guitar loop to this beat. But we can obviously get that to fit the mood a lot better with some reverb. So let's go ahead and add the brand new spring reverb 636. And here's the initial interface. It's got an on-off switch. And then it's got preamp gain. I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, but you could actually use this plugin without even using it as a reverb plugin. You can just make a dirty preamp out of just this spring reverb. It's got a little light that'll show us if we overload, and we can send in different levels, mic level or line level. We've got our decay, short and long, mono and stereo width. We've got a blend from the preamp to the reverb. That's what I was talking about before. And our output gain right here. There's a few other features down below, but let's start coloring the sound of the guitar. So let's hear what it sounds like just by default. Let's add in the reverb. We currently only have preamp signal. I'm gonna solo the guitar. And you know, right away we have that classic spring reverb style. But let's start adding in some gain to the preamp and see how dirty we can get it. You can see I'm only at about 30 dB, which, you know, is a lot of gain, but we have so much room to go, so you can get it really distorted. And changing the type here will actually color the sound a little bit differently. You can hear the difference there. I think the mic level is a little bit more driven and a little bit grittier. Blend in some more reverb. Let's take out some of that input. And we can bring the decay down. This is your typical reverb decay, short and long. Let's make it as wide as it can go. Good. Now in lots of these new plugins, you've got, you know, your basic set of controls in the initial page, but if we hit this arrow here, we get access to a bit more. And on the different plugins, there'll be even more down below the initial controls. So we have a pre and post filter, as well as the ability to change the kind of reverb tank, which will change the character of the sound. So pre-delay, which is a fun way to maybe add some groove or a little more space to the sound. I'm gonna crank this reverb so we can hear what's happening. This can go all the way up to 250 milliseconds. And for the pre-filter, we can turn it on, and this is gonna help us not get as muddy of a tone. So I'm gonna go ahead and choose a high pass here. You can see obviously we have frequency and resonance. You can really hear the spring, but let's hear what some of these different spring tanks sound like. So some are more drastic than others, some are a little more subtle, but I like the different characters of the different tanks. I especially like the space echo sound. I'm gonna bring our pre-delay down. And then we have our post EQ, which affects the wet signal. We can add resonance here. You can hear that sweeping through the frequencies. We don't need too much of that on this guitar sound. And then we've obviously got a high pass and a low pass. But one thing I want to do is add a little more character to this sound, and I'm actually going to use one of the delays from the FX Collection. So I'll use the delay Eternity, and one thing I like about this delay is it's got a bit crusher in it. So let's hear what this sounds like just out of the box, and I am adding it before the reverb so that the reverb is the last thing in the chain. That's not exactly what I had in mind, but there's a cool preset here called Guitar Triplet Wah. Now that's really cool, but it's very dramatic, so I'm going to bring down the dry wet here. Let me start crushing that delay signal. Yeah, that might be a little bit too much, but you can obviously see how far you can take that bit crusher. That was cool. Yeah, I'm gonna go even more subtle and bring the dry wet down. Let's hear this without the spring reverb. So the spring reverb is adding quite a bit of character. Let's hear it without the delay. They go together pretty well. Let's hear that with the beat again. If I side chain it, it'll sound even better. So I'm pretty happy with that sound. Let's go ahead and take a look at using this spring reverb on a bass line. Now, reverb on a bass line sounds like a bad idea, but I'm actually not going to use the spring reverb for the reverb. I'm just going to show you the power of driving that preamp. So here's my bass line before adding the spring reverb. Cool. I'm going to flip it on, but I'm going to bring the blend all the way down to just preamp. I don't want to actually use this for reverb. I just want to use it to add some color. Let's switch to that mic level. You can see my overload is lighting right up. Way too far. But I love the richness of this bass sound with this spring reverb's preamp added versus this is it before. It loses a ton of body. A much stronger sound just by adding some gain into that preamp. So I'm at sort of the section of the song where everything's dropped out and it's building up to one final drop. And I've got this epic pad sound. It's like a chorusy strings kind of sound with no effects on it. And the reverb intensity is meant to be a super cinematic reverb. Let's take a look at the interface. So even though aesthetically it's different than some of the more vintage looking Arturia plugins, it follows kind of the regular pattern here. We've got an on-off switch. We've got our pre-delay here. What I like about this plugin is in a couple instances you have the ability to not only work in milliseconds, but to also tap that button right there, and now we are working in time with our project's tempo. So I have access to subdivisions of time rather than milliseconds. We've got our distance, our size, which I really love the aesthetic of this size. The visualization just gives you a different way of looking at your reverb. We've got our dampening, our width, dry wet signal, the level of the reverb, a soft clip option, feedback, which they advise you use very carefully, decay, along with a freeze button, which I love. Let me go ahead and freeze a signal for you. I'm going to crank the size up. So now I've frozen this moment in time of the reverb, and you could totally resample this and use it for an effect or something. Anyway, you can tell already. Let me just listen to that pad sound before this initial preset of the intensity reverb is on. This is before. This is after. Off. Let's try a couple more presets so you can see what they've got loaded up for you. Let's check out one of these Granulize plugins. So you can see there's a lot happening here, and we're going to dive into what actually is happening here. Intense. Definitely more of a sound design tool. But if we dial back the wet, it's pretty cool. One more. Let's just look at vintage, because that'll be a more standard sound. Let me just add in some soft clip here so we can demo how far that goes. Definitely with the soft clip, a little goes a long way. But like I said with the earlier plugin, there is more under the hood here. All right, so we can kind of recognize this even though the aesthetic is different, but we've got a pre-filter and a post-filter. And I'm actually going to switch this to notch so we can find a particular frequency. Let's turn that back on. We've got the wet all the way turned up so we can hear what's happening here. Yeah, let's get some of that brightness and dial back in some of the original signal. And that's pre and post filter. That's pretty straightforward. Down here is something that's really cool and unique in this reverb plugin. We've got an envelope follower. So we can actually set different sources. We have the reverb's input. So if I just start playing, the input triggers this envelope. The source can also be routed to an external sidechain. Here we have a built-in compressor threshold. You can see that changing here in the envelope follower. We've got the attack of the envelope, the release. We can change this gain so the envelope is actually detecting more or less of the input signal. And we have delay here, which again has one of these little eighth notes next to it, which means we can make this be in time. Now, I'm going to talk about these four knobs, but first let's go into this function setting here. So we can draw in our own patterns here. We can add points, bring them down, bring them up. We can add curves as well. Different types of curves, super subtle. And we can send this to anything. And that's what these four knobs are all about. on both of these functions because we can do a drop down here and it gives you a set of different destinations within reverb intensity. So you can really get creative with what's happening here. So let's pick a pattern from some of these function presets, and we will just pick a slow rise. Let's go ahead and assign that to the post filter frequency because we've got that notch on there already, right? So if I actually bring this frequency to 12 o'clock and bring that up a bit, we see now that it's following the function here. And this is another knob that can be adjusted to be in time, which is actually very handy when you're dealing with an effect like this. Let's hear what the sound is. So we're already adding another level of movement to the sound. Let's make it faster. And let's actually make this distance larger so it can travel a farther distance and be more dramatic. Let's go even faster on the rate. I mean, that almost gives it its own sidechain pumping sound, but when you get crazy with it and you start drawing jagged lines and patterns like this, notice this knob is going wild. It's almost like a rotary sound now, like a Leslie speaker. And that's only with mapping one of these function knobs. You could get crazy in having things turning all over the place, which is what we kind of heard with that granulized preset before. Alright, so what did you think of those two reverbs? Let us know in a comment down below. Arturia is known for really great sounding virtual instruments, taking those classic synths and keyboards and translating them into the virtual world. Well, now they've applied that same level of detail to their FX collection. If you pick up the FX collection or have already used some of Arturia's effects, let us know what you think of them in the comments down below. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoy, and don't forget to subscribe to ADSR. This has been Taetro. Have a good one.